The year is 1237. The Mongols are coming to invade Goryeo. The people have no hope. They turn to Buddhist monks to save the country. In an effort to change Korea's fate, the monks carve prayers into 80,000 woodblocks to invoke the help of the Buddha. This story will lead us right into the mountains of Gyeongsang, to the temple at Haeinsa. But it doesn't end there. There's more to this story, so let's go. They've restored this in the Green Army. Look. The guardians of this temple have obviously been restored recently. When I visited a few years ago, they hadn't been restored yet. At this time, the Mongols were the strongest country in the world, and to the Koreans, they thought maybe the Mongols are unbeatable. And so for that reason, their only hope was to turn to their religion, which at that time was the state religion of Buddhism. Between 1231 and 1270, there were a series of military campaigns by the Mongol Empire to try and capture Korea. There were 6 or 7, depending on how you look at it, major invasion campaigns. These invasions came at a tremendous cost to human life and resources. But what's interesting about this is that it was this period of around 40 years that the Mongols continually tried to invade Korea, unsuccessfully for quite some time. The Mongols had a lot of difficulty invading Korea for a few reasons, but mainly because of the geography, being an extremely mountainous country, and at that time a divided country too. But also because of several guerrilla armies, including the famous monk armies. Eventually, the Mongols did manage to take Korea as a vassal state, which meant that the Goryeo dynasty had to pay tribute to the Mongols for some 80 years, until around the year 1350, when the Koreans rebelled and that relationship ended and Korea became a free state once again. What you're looking at are more than 80,000 wood blocks painstakingly carved with Korean Buddhist treaties, scriptures and laws, which are known as the Tripitaka Koreana. As they contain the oldest and most complete version of the Buddhist canon, this is one of the most important Buddhist relics in the world. Work on the first set of wooden blocks began in the year 1011 and concluded in 1087, and was an effort to pray for Goryeo facing invasion from the Khitans. The first set were destroyed in a fire in the Mongol invasions of 1232. King Gojong thereafter ordered the revision and recreation of the woodblocks, and the carving began in 1237 and was completed in 12 years. So after that, the recreated woodblocks numbered in more than 80,000. This reproduction was an enormous national commitment of money, manpower and resources, and is perhaps comparable to the US 1960s Apollo program moon landings by NASA. Thousands of scholars and craftsmen were employed in this massive project. So you can see by the sheer number of the wood carvings that thousands of craftsmen and scholars were employed to work on this huge scale project. When I see things like this, I'm always struck by just how scholarly the Korean people are throughout their history. All of the different Korean kingdoms, over the centuries that Korea has been occupied by people, they're really into studying. And so, you know, I think Koreans here have turned Buddhism, being a scripture-based religion, and turned it into a scholarly exercise, you know, some 1,000 years ago. And to this day, it's been projected by generations of successive Koreans after that, which I think is something really special about Korean culture. Since wood is incredibly vulnerable to fire, moisture and parasites, it's quite an incredible feat that after, 7 centuries, these wood carvings are still around today. So how did they do it? It's incredible that all these blocks have been successfully preserved without a single piece showing any signs of decay or warping. To prevent the decaying of the wood, the craftsmen used innovative techniques that were way ahead of their time. First, the birch wood that they used was soaked in seawater for 3 years before it was cut. It was placed away from sunlight and then exposed to the wind for 3 years. Only at this point were the wood blocks finally ready for carving. After they were painstakingly carved, they were covered in a poisonous lacquer which kept insects and parasites away, and framed with metal which prevented them from warping with heat and with cold. In 1838, the carvings were moved here to Haeinsa. The buildings that house the woodblocks are simple in design without any decoration really, but they were designed with the sole purpose of keeping and housing the woodblocks and keeping them from being damaged. So to this day, to prevent any fire or damage to the wood carvings, there's a fire truck right nearby. There's fire extinguishers on every corner of the building, and I've seen 3 security guards so far just constantly monitoring the area to make sure that no damage happens. You can donate here. Haeinsa is located in Gyeongsang, which is in central South Korea. It's up high on a mountain, so it's quite cold, but it's interesting because most Korean temples are in the mountains because of Korea's affinity in terms of national identity with the mountain. It was built in the year 802 under unified Silla, and at the very front of the temple you can see a tree which is believed to have been planted to signify the establishment of this temple. This tree commemorates the founding of the temple in the year 802. Unfortunately, it's fallen apart a little bit. Unfortunately, it burnt down in 1817. This main temple building right behind me used to actually be a 2-story pavilion, which is not common in Korean Buddhism. But unfortunately, because it burnt down, it wasn't rebuilt as a two-story pavilion, just as a one-story temple. It was rebuilt in 1818. Haeinsa is most famous for housing the Tropitaka Koreana, which is the 80,000 woodblocks that we talked about earlier. Luckily, even though Haeinsa has been subject to many fires, none of them have come close to touching the wood carvings, perhaps owing to their auspicious origins. Haeinsa faced yet another crisis more recently during the Korean War. The Gyeosan mountain area, including Haeinsa, was the site of fierce guerrilla warfare during the Korean War. In the middle of the Korean War, North Korea had retreated from this area and had left behind, unfortunately, some guerrilla soldiers. The guerrilla soldiers were hiding out in the mountains that were proving really difficult for the South Korean forces to draw out. So there was an order for the Gyeosan area, including Haeinsa, to be bombed by air raids. However, as there were some people who appreciated the value of the Haeinsa site and its precious artifacts, it remains intact to this day. Air Force Colonel Kim Young-hwan was ordered to destroy Haeinsa during the anti-guerrilla campaign in September of 1951. He led his squadron of jet fighters flying over this area, but decided not to drop a single bomb. He later said in an investigation that he would not burn the nation's invaluable cultural treasures. He's now considered a hero and admired for his righteous disobedience.